Well, it's an extraordinary announcement, and in many ways, it's a game changer. We're celebrating the 70th anniversary of ANZUS, which was so necessary for the defence of Australia during World War II. But this is ANZUS 2.0. It takes us to a new level because it's not just about a treaty. Importantly, it's about shared capability and putting real and tangible effort into the sorts of things that will save our nation and protect our nation into the future.
The US has only shared this technology, the nuclear propulsion technology for the subs, with one other country, that being the UK back in the 50s. How do you reflect on the fact that this is only the second time in their history that they've been willing to share that?
Well, this represents the changing world order. It's not just about China, even though that is obviously a focus in the Indo-Pacific, but it's also about Russia, which has significantly increased its capability in recent years. And frankly, it's not just about the submarines, although they are absolutely crucial for Australia. I mean, historically, we've had a tortured history with submarines, and we learned some pretty salient lessons when we had no submarines during World War II, and aggressive power came right up to our shore. But now, with this nuclear-powered capability, we can get to the danger zones faster, and we can get there in a more timely manner to be able to deliver the results we need, because submarines are not just offensive, they are also defensive. And they are absolutely essential. They're the crown jewels. And this announcement by the United States, the UK and Prime Minister Morrison represents an entree to the crown jewels of military and intelligence capability.
One thing that ANZUS doesn't have, and I asked the Prime Minister about this today, is a commitment to automatically come to the aid of the other in the event of being attacked, like, say, the NATO treaty has. Is that a weak point in the alliance?
Oh, look, Kieran, we've displayed the real impact of the alliance, and we've lived it through the terrible events of 9/11. The fact is the United States would not be opening up access to this technology to Australia without significant concern about the safety and security of the Indo-Pacific region. Let me be really clear. I'm here in Washington, D.C. This is a very significant announcement. Across the city all day, there's been widespread speculation about what was happening, and people have been shaken to the core with the significance of this announcement, because it illustrates just how significant looming threats are in the Indo-Pacific region, how there is a new world order. It also illustrates the fact that the United States, without taking its eye off the threat of terrorism, is moving to a new theatre to protect its interests, but also to protect the interests of its allies. And importantly for Australia, this protects the Australian people, because it means that we have the capacity to get further, faster, to defend our interests, whether it be in the South China Sea or be in some other place where Australian interests are at risk. We have that capacity. We've never had the legs to be able to move quickly to defend our interests in the region, our maritime interests in the region. And frankly, I applaud the Morrison government, genuinely applaud it, for making a decision to can the French proposal when we've only spent 1% to 2% of the total cost. You don't can these proposals, and all too often it's happened to defence, that they can the proposals. It hasn't worked when they've spent 50% of the money. In this case, we've made the hard decisions having spent only 1% or 2% of the total cost, thank God. And now we're doing what needs to be done and getting the capacity, the sea legs, to be able to go where we need to go.
It's been one of the fundamental critiques of the submarines, not only the hiccups in terms of manufacture and that sort of thing, but fundamentally that they didn't provide Australia with the reach that a nuclear sub has the capacity for. Is this decision one that should have been made years ago?
Well, look, you know, I was there in government when we were making these sorts of decisions, and you can only go with the best information you had. But most importantly, the Americans were reluctant very reluctant to share it with us. And at the same time, there wasn't the same existential threat to Australia's interests 5 years ago that there is today and will be in the next 5 years. I mean, we're in a different dynamic to what we inherited in 2014 or what the Rudd government had in 2007. It is a very different world and it's rapidly changing. And the most important point to note is submarines are just part of the equation. This is a sharing of the most intimate technology by the United States, and it will extend into intelligence. It will extend into all the areas where we've had extraordinary access, but the Americans still have a closed door. The fact that the UK has stepped up to the plate as well is hugely significant. I mean, in truth, the UK hasn't been as active as would have been assumed in the Indo-Pacific region for a very, very long time, many decades in truth, since the fall of Singapore. This is a whole new ballgame for Australia, but importantly, it's a whole new ballgame about the attitude of America towards its allies and the UK's engagement in the Indo-Pacific region.
You touched on this a bit earlier, the sensitivity being with the French. The government will have to be careful, won't it, in the way that it managed this awkward decision now in terms of the French relationship?
Well, of course it's tricky, and the French have pretty extensive interests in the Indo-Pacific region, but it's not as if they weren't given an enormous amount of warning that if they weren't able to help us with the capability, we would have to cancel the contract. Now, in military terms, you can't just cancel a contract and go and buy something off the shelf at Woolies. We need a capability that is fully integrated with our own needs, but also fully integrated with the military needs of our biggest partners, our allies. And so, you know, it's not just about the physical, submarine or the physical plane. So much these days is about the software and the technology that goes into them. And what we do know is, fearfully, the next kinetic activity may well involve fewer men and women being at the front line and more technology being at the front line. The United States spends more on its military every year than the next 12 nations combined. If we're going to have a partner, by God, having the United States and the United Kingdom makes us, protects our interests more than any other partnership we could possibly have.
Just finally, Joe Hockey, you mentioned the China situation. Russia also a concern, but there is really no comparison in terms of the growing might of China versus Russia. It's fair to say that it is China and its assertiveness and coercion that is front of mind when we look at this new arrangement.
Well, of course, that's going to be the take, but sometimes you just can't predict where the threats come from and what form they take. And, the truth about, for example, submarines, it's not just about watching old movies. It is about deploying personnel to key areas in a covert manner. It is about listening at the bottom of the ocean for traffic and for activity that you might not pick up through normal means. And importantly, what we're saying is that Australia is a smart nation. Having this technology and helping to build it in Australia is absolutely fundamental. It's not a single industry, standalone industry. The flow-on impact across industry from the United States and the UK into Australia, and importantly, for Australian innovation to go back to the UK and the United States is extraordinary. And, it's not an overnight decision. It's been coming for years. And in fact, it's been worked on by people in one form or another for years. But it's now it's not only the obvious decision, it's actually the only decision we can take to protect our interests. After the French submission fell over, there's no other option, Kieran. We haven't got any other options to protect our nation. I mean, now we are one of the biggest energy exporters in the Indo-Pacific region. We're the biggest exporter of liquid gas in the world. 20 years ago, we didn't have those pipelines. We didn't have those ports. 20 years ago, we didn't have the huge role of iron ore exports, but it's all changed for us. And we can no longer assume that distance is going to be an impediment to a significant military threat to Australia. We need to be out there, and we need to make sure that we have the capacity to take out of the defence of our nation to far-flung parts of the earth to protect our interests.
Former Treasurer and former Ambassador to the United States, now with Bondi Partners, Joe Hockey, very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran.